The receipt was so small it almost looked harmless. Just a thin strip of paper. A few numbers. A logo at the top. And one line that made a 14-year-old boy go completely still. Account balance, $10.17. Service charge, $35. For a second, Eli thought he was reading it wrong. He blinked, looked again, then at the teller, then back at the receipt. Wait, he said quietly. So, I had $10. The teller didn't even look up right away. She was already reaching for the next customer. Yes, she said. The account dropped below the minimum balance. Eli swallowed. So you took 35? It's a standard maintenance fee. That word. Standard. Like there was something normal about taking $35 from a kid who only had 10. Like the math wasn't insulting enough on its own. Eli turned and looked at the glass doors. His grandfather was outside on the bench near the window, waiting with his coffee in one hand and his old denim cap folded over his knee. Eli had asked him to come, but only for the ride. Not for this. Not for the part where a grown adult in a tie explained to him that being poor was now a billable offense. He stepped outside holding the receipt like it might burn him. His grandfather looked up once. That was all it took. What happened? Eli handed him the paper. Didn't say a word. Grandpa Walter took it, read the lines once, then again. His face didn't change much. That was the thing about Walter. He wasn't loud when he was angry. He got quieter. And somehow that was worse. He pressed the receipt flat against his knee with 2 fingers. $35, he said. Eli gave a short, embarrassed laugh. Yeah, for having 10. Walter looked through the window at the bank counter, then back down at the logo on the receipt. And something in his eyes sharpened. Not outrage. Recognition. A tiny, private click. Like an old lock turning somewhere deep in his head. He folded the receipt into a perfect square, stood up slowly, and said, almost to himself, that bank just made a very expensive mistake. Walter Briggs was 72 years old, lived alone, and kept things nobody else kept. Rubber bands wrapped around other rubber bands. Manuals for radios he no longer owned. Coffee cans full of screws sorted by size. Birthday cards tied with string. Tax returns from the Reagan years. He didn't hoard. He archived. There was a difference, and if you asked him, he'd explain it in about 3 sentences, and then walk away before the conversation could become emotional. His late wife, June, used to call the basement Walter's museum of things that might matter later. Usually with a smile. Sometimes not. After she died, he kept the habit. Maybe because routine felt safer than grief. Maybe because paper stayed where you put it. People didn't. Every Thursday, he ate lunch at the same diner. Every Friday, he checked the tire pressure on a truck he barely drove. Every Saturday morning, he picked up Eli for errands. Hardware store, feed store, drugstore, then a chocolate donut neither of them admitted they were there for. Eli loved those Saturdays because Walter never talked to him like he was fragile. Never used that careful adult voice. He just handed him tools, asked him to hold things steady, told him when a bolt was stripped, and once in a while said something so dry it took Eli 3 full seconds to realize it was a joke. That morning, they'd gone to the bank because Eli was trying to save for a used laptop. Nothing fancy, just something that didn't freeze every time he opened more than 2 tabs for school. He'd been putting away birthday money, mowing money, whatever cash he could save. A little here, a little there. The account was supposed to help him learn financial responsibility. That was the phrase from the brochure. Now he was standing outside with a negative balance and a hot face. And his grandfather was staring at a receipt like it had insulted the family name. Grandpa, it's fine, Eli said, though it obviously wasn't. Walter didn't answer. He just kept looking at the logo. Midland County Savings. Except it wasn't really Midland County Savings anymore. Not the original one. The building was newer. The branding was cleaner. The tellers said absolutely too often. But the name stayed. And names mattered. Walter slipped the receipt into his shirt pocket. Was this the same account they opened for you 3 years ago? Yeah. The student starter account. I guess. You guess? Eli shrugged. Mom filled out most of it. Walter nodded once. Then he asked the question that changed the whole direction of the day. Did you ever agree to convert it? Convert it to what? Walter looked back through the glass. A faint smile touched one corner of his mouth. Not a happy smile. The kind that shows up when someone old suddenly realizes the person across from them is playing a game they learned decades ago. Exactly, he said. They didn't go back inside. Not yet. Walter drove them home in silence. Not tense silence. Measured silence. Thinking silence. He drove with both hands on the wheel, chin slightly tucked, the way he did when repairing something in his head. Eli watched the road and tried not to feel stupid. That was the part that stung. Not even the money. The feeling. Like he'd done something childish. Like the bank had reached across the counter and said, without saying it, "You should have known better." At a stoplight, Walter said, "You did nothing wrong." Eli looked over. Walter kept his eyes on the road. "But they want you to feel like you did. That's how fees work." It was such a strange sentence that Eli actually forgot to be upset for a second. How do fees work? Walter gave the smallest shrug. They make shame do half the collection. Then the light changed. And that was that. No speech. No dramatic promise. Just one sentence hanging in the truck between them. At home, Walter didn't take off his boots. He went straight through the kitchen, past the laundry room, and down into the basement. Eli followed. The basement smelled like cedar, dust, and machine oil. Metal shelves lined the walls. Everything had a label. Everything. Not because Walter was obsessive. Because once, a long time ago, disorder had cost him more than money. That part Eli only knew in pieces. Fragments from overheard adult conversations. A lawsuit after a factory injury. Some insurance paperwork that got lost. His mom crying in the kitchen when she was younger. Grandpa learning, the hard way, that big institutions were never confused when confusion benefited them. Walter crouched in front of a gray file cabinet with chipped paint. Second drawer. Left side. He pulled out folders one at a time. House. June medical. Car titles. Banking. There it was. A thick folder held shut with 2 tired rubber bands. Walter set it on the workbench. Eli leaned closer. "What are you looking for?" Walter slid on his reading glasses. "Something old. That helpful, huh?" Walter almost smiled. Old is where they hide the rules. He opened the folder. Inside were passbooks. Canceled checks. Pamphlets with browned edges. Statements from banks that no longer existed. And under all of that, tucked between 2 folded deposit forms, was a thin, blue booklet with white print. Walter froze. Just for a second. He touched the cover with his thumb, then handed it to Eli. On the front it said, State Consumer Banking Code, revised 1980. Eli looked up. "You kept this." Walter adjusted his glasses. "I keep what people stop wanting you to read." That should have sounded dramatic. Coming from anyone else, it would have. From Walter, it sounded like a man explaining why he kept extra nails in a coffee tin. He opened the booklet to a page already marked with faded yellow tabs. Not 1 tab. 3. Like he'd visited this section before. A long time ago. Eli watched his grandfather's finger move slowly down the page. Then stop. Then go back. Walter said nothing. He just read it again. And again. The basement got very quiet. Upstairs, the fridge hummed. A pipe clicked. Somewhere outside, a dog barked and stopped. Then Walter took off his glasses, looked at Eli, and asked a question that made no sense at all. "Did they ever send your mother a notice in the mail?" "A notice for what?" "For the account changing." "I don't know." Walter nodded. Not disappointed. Just confirming something. Then he reached deeper into the folder and pulled out an old brochure. Different logo. Same bank lineage. Front cover. Youth Saver Account. Start smart. Save early. He opened it. Ran his finger along a sentence. Turned it toward Eli. There, in small print near the bottom, were words Eli never would have noticed on his own. No service charge assessed that reduces custodial principal below disclosed minimum protections under state law. Eli frowned. What does that mean? Walter folded the brochure shut. It means your $10 was never supposed to become their $35. And just like that, the room changed. The story changed. Because now this wasn't about a fee. It was about whether the bank knew exactly what it was doing. That night, Walter called Eli's mother. Not on speaker. Not for drama. Just because some conversations deserve privacy. Eli sat at the kitchen table doing half-hearted homework and listened to Walter's side of it. Did you sign anything converting the account? Pause. No, not opening it. Later. Pause. No, don't guess. Think. Longer pause. Then Walter reached for a pen and wrote 2 words on the back of an envelope. No notice. He asked another question. Then another. Dates. Emails. Statements. Whether she remembered a packet in the mail. Whether Eli had ever gone in and signed new forms after turning 13. No. 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 Walter ended the call with his usual, all right then, which somehow carried 6 layers of meaning. He sat down. Pause. No, not opening it. Later. Pause. No, don't guess. Think. Longer pause. Then Walter reached for a pen and wrote 2 words on the back of an envelope. No notice. He asked another question. Then another. Dates. Emails. Statements. Whether she remembered a packet in the mail. Whether Eli had ever gone in and signed new forms after turning 13. No. 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 Walter ended the call with his usual, all right then, which somehow carried 6 layers of meaning. He sat down, spread the old code booklet, the brochure, and the receipt side by side. Eli stared at the papers. So we sue them? Walter snorted. No. Then what? Walter tapped the receipt with one finger. First, we make them explain themselves slowly. The next morning, they went back. Same branch. Same polished floors. Same bowl of branded pins no one actually wanted. This time, Walter asked for the branch manager. Not angrily. Politely. That was worse. The manager came out after a few minutes. Mid-40s. Smooth tie. Confident smile. The kind of man who'd practiced saying difficult things in a reassuring voice. Mr. Briggs, he said, after glancing at the account screen. I'm told there's a concern about a service charge. Walter placed the receipt on the desk. Then the old brochure. Then, after a deliberate pause, the 1980 booklet. Not sliding them aggressively. Just laying them down like cards in a game he already understood better than the other player. My grandson had $10 in a custodial youth account, Walter said. Your bank assessed $35. The manager folded his hands. I understand why that feels frustrating. Walter said nothing. That silence stretched just long enough to become uncomfortable. The manager cleared his throat. In some cases, starter accounts convert automatically based on age or balance thresholds. Based on consent? Walter asked. The manager blinked. Sometimes based on account terms. Walter tilted his head slightly. Show me the consent. The manager's smile thinned. I may not have that document immediately available. Walter nodded. Then show me the notice. The manager glanced at the teller line, then back. As I said, these are standard account maintenance policies. Walter tapped the blue booklet once. No. This is a standard account maintenance policy. Then he tapped the brochure. This is a representation made by your predecessor institution. Then the receipt. And this is a fee assessed against a minor custodial balance below protected minimums, without proof of conversion notice or assent. The manager looked at him differently after that. Not like an old man anymore. Like a problem. I can offer a courtesy refund today, he said. Eli looked up immediately. $35 back. Done. Over. That was probably the end of the story, right? But Walter didn't even glance at him. He kept his eyes on the manager. Courtesy suggests generosity. His voice stayed calm. This wasn't generosity. The manager's fingers tightened. Mr. Briggs, with respect. No, Walter said. Still calm. Respect would have been not charging a child $35 for possessing 10. A woman at the next desk looked over, then looked away fast. The manager lowered his voice. If you'd like, I can reverse the fee and add an extra credit for the inconvenience. How much? The manager hesitated. $75. There it was. The first offer. Quiet money. Clean ending. A small price to make embarrassment disappear. Walter leaned back. The chair creaked. And then he said something that made the manager stop writing. How many other children? The manager went still. I'm sorry. How many youth accounts were converted this way? I don't have those numbers. You don't have them, Walter said softly. Or you don't want to say them in front of witnesses? The air changed again. You could feel it. Because now the money wasn't the point. The point was scale. One fee is a mistake. A system is a choice. The manager closed the folder. If you're threatening legal action. Walter stood up. No. He gathered the papers. I'm threatening arithmetic. Then he took Eli by the shoulder and walked out. On the drive home, Eli finally asked the question that had been sitting in his throat all morning. Why didn't you take the money? Walter kept driving. Because they offered it too fast. That's bad. It means they knew where the soft spot was. Eli looked out the window. Fields blurred by. Telephone poles. A gas station. 2 men loading lumber into a pickup. Normal life, still happening. How do you know all this stuff? Eli asked. Walter exhaled through his nose. For a few seconds, Eli thought he might not answer. Then he did. Your grandmother got charged a hospital fee once for a test she never received. Eli turned. Walter's eyes stayed on the road. They sent collections. Said we signed something. We hadn't. I was younger then. Hotter in the head. I thought if you told the truth loud enough, truth would win by itself. He shook his head once. It doesn't. What happened? I learned paper wins. That was all. Just 4 words. But they seemed to explain the whole basement. Every file. Every label. Every saved brochure nobody else would keep. Walter wasn't sentimental. He was trained. By pain. By bureaucracy. By the particular cruelty of being told a system is fair while it quietly empties your pockets. When they got home, he made 3 calls. First, to the bank's customer care line. Recorded. He asked for documentation of conversion notice and fee authority on Eli's account. Second, to the state banking consumer division. He didn't rant. He asked where to submit scans of account materials and whether protections for custodial youth accounts survived acquisition when products were functionally continued under successor branding. That exact phrase. Eli wrote it down because it sounded like something from a movie where the old man turns out not to be harmless after all. Third, Walter called an attorney. Not a big city litigator. A woman named Denise Harper who'd helped June update their wills years ago. Small office. Sharp mind. No wasted syllables. Walter emailed the scans. Then waited. And waiting, in stories like this, is where people usually lose nerve. That's what banks count on. Time. Fatigue. The belief that your life is too busy to keep caring. But Walter was retired. Stubborn. And now, a little offended. Which is a dangerous combination. By Wednesday, Denise called back. Eli was there when Walter took it. He could only hear one side, but even one side was enough. Pause. That's what I thought. Pause. Not federal. Pause. State survivorship language? Longer pause. Then Walter sat down slowly. He didn't speak until the call ended. Eli was practically vibrating. What? Walter rested the phone on the table. The law is still good. Eli stared. What law? Walter looked at him over the rim of his glasses. The 1980 revision. Section on custodial savings protections. He tapped the old booklet. If a bank offers or inherits a minor custodial product under substantially similar terms, it can't assess a maintenance charge that consumes protected principal without documented notice and a reasonable opt-out period to the custodian. Eli blinked. Walter saw his face and translated. They can't quietly turn your $10 into their $35 and call it policy. That should have been enough. But it got better. Because Denise had found one more thing. The old brochure language wasn't just marketing fluff. Midland's predecessor bank had filed youth account disclosures with the state decades ago. And those disclosures mirrored the same protections. Meaning this wasn't some obscure technicality Walter was trying to stretch. It was a rule. One the bank either forgot or hoped everyone else had. 2 days later, the district compliance officer called. Not the branch manager. Not customer service. Compliance. That alone told Walter he'd reached the layer of the building where smiles start costing money. The woman on the phone sounded careful. Professional. Almost warm. She said the bank was reviewing the matter. Walter said good. She said the account may have been reclassified through an automated system. Walter said machines don't have legal authority. She paused at that, then asked what resolution he was seeking. Walter looked at Eli before answering. And this is where most people get it wrong. They think justice is always a huge number. A dramatic settlement. A camera crew outside the courthouse. But Walter knew something simpler. Sometimes the cleanest victory is forcing a powerful institution to say the truth out loud. He said, full refund. Written explanation. Written confirmation, no negative reporting. Review of similarly situated youth accounts. And an apology to my grandson. There was silence on the line. Then, we may be able to accommodate part of that. Walter's voice went flat. You may be able to follow the law. Another silence. Then she said she'd call back. By then, something had shifted in Eli too. The embarrassment was gone. In its place was a weird new feeling. Not confidence exactly. Something steadier. Like the ground under him had stopped moving. He started paying attention to things he'd never noticed before. How often adults used vague words when they didn't want to be pinned down. How often policy meant don't argue. How quickly tone changed when you had paper in your hand. The bank called again Friday afternoon. Then Saturday morning. By Monday, they asked for an in-person meeting. Different room this time. Private office. Not the open desk near the lobby. When they arrived, the branch manager was there. So was the compliance officer, on speaker. And this time, nobody smiled too early. The manager began with polished language. After further review, we determined the fee on Eli's account should not have been assessed as it was. Walter said nothing. The man kept going. The account appears to have been converted in error during a product migration. Converted in error. Interesting phrase. Passive. Gentle. Like nobody did it. Like the fee floated down from the ceiling and landed on a child's account by weather. Walter waited. The manager swallowed. We will refund all assessed charges, restore the account, provide an additional goodwill credit. Walter lifted a hand. Stop there. The room did. He leaned forward slightly. Say it plainly. The manager blinked. Walter's eyes didn't move. Not in error. Plainly. The compliance officer cut in from the speaker, voice even tighter now. Mr. Briggs, the bank improperly assessed a fee on a protected youth custodial account without confirming lawful conversion notice. Walter nodded once. There it was. Plain language. Truth with its makeup off. Eli sat very still. The manager slid a paper across the desk. Refund of the fee. Restoration of the balance. An extra $100. Written confirmation, no adverse reporting. And one more line. The bank has initiated an internal review of comparable youth account conversions and related fee assessments. Walter read the page carefully. Then he looked at Eli. Not in a dramatic, movie grandpa way. Just a quiet glance. You good? Eli nodded. Walter signed nothing until they added one sentence. He wrote it himself in neat block letters. An apology will be delivered directly to the account holder. The manager read it. Looked like he didn't want to. Then signed. He turned to Eli. And for the first time since this whole thing started, he stopped sounding like a bank. He sounded like a man who knew he'd been part of something ugly. I'm sorry, he said. You should not have been treated that way. Eli didn't know what to say, so he just said, okay. But inside, it mattered more than he expected. Because adults always talk about money like it's just numbers. It isn't. Not when you're 14. Not when every dollar took time. Not when losing it makes you feel small on purpose. They left the bank with the papers in a manila envelope. Outside, in the parking lot, Eli looked at Walter and laughed. Not because it was funny. Because the pressure finally had somewhere to go. You made them rewrite the apology. Walter put on his cap. It was incomplete. Eli laughed harder. Then he asked, are they really reviewing other accounts? Walter opened the truck door. If they're smart. And if they're not. Walter started the engine. Then somebody else with a filing cabinet will. A month later, something strange happened. Two families from town mentioned refunds. Quietly. One at the diner. One after church. No big announcement. No press release. Just little checks showing up with letters about account servicing discrepancies. Walter never gloated. Didn't need to. He just listened. Folded the information away. Literally and mentally. One evening, Eli went down to the basement and found Walter rebanding the banking folder. Putting the blue 1980 booklet back where it belonged. Putting the brochure behind it. Putting the signed apology on top. Why keep that? Eli asked. Walter looked up. Because memory fades. He slid the folder into the drawer. Paper doesn't. Eli leaned against the workbench. The room felt different now. Still smelled like dust and cedar. Still had coffee cans full of screws. But now he understood something he hadn't before. None of this was random. Not the labeled shelves. Not the saved receipts. Not the way Walter asked calm questions instead of making loud speeches. This wasn't about being old-fashioned. It was about refusing to be easy to erase. Grandpa, were you scared they wouldn't care? Walter shut the drawer. Thought about it. Then nodded once. Of course. Then why keep pushing? Walter looked at him for a long second. Because sometimes older people answer with wisdom. And sometimes they answer with something smaller and better. Something true. Because they were counting on us not to. That was the line Eli remembered later. Not the legal wording. Not the money. Not even the apology. That line. They were counting on us not to. Years from now, he'd forget the teller's face. He'd forget the manager's tie. He'd probably even forget the exact amount. But he would remember what it felt like to watch power change rooms. To watch a bank go from confident to careful, because one old man knew where the paper lived. And maybe that's why stories like this stick. Because most people have had some version of that moment. A desk. A form. A fee. A voice explaining something unfair like it's normal. And for a second, you wonder if maybe you're the problem. Maybe you missed something. Maybe you should just pay it and move on. That's how a lot of quiet theft survives. Not through force. through exhaustion, through embarrassment, through the hope that you'll decide it's too small to fight. But small is exactly where people learn what they can get away with. $35 from a boy with 10. That wasn't just a charge. It was a test of whether anyone was paying attention. Unfortunately for them, his grandfather was, and he'd been paying attention since 1980. So if you ever feel that little twist in your stomach at a counter, on a bill, in an email full of polished language and hidden intent, pause, read the line again, ask the slower question, keep the paper, because sometimes the difference between powerless and protected is just one person willing to say, no, show me where that was allowed. And if that person happens to be an old man in a denim cap with a basement full of files, even better, because the world has always underestimated people who look quiet. That's usually when it loses. So tell me in the comments.